Hey guys, welcome back to GTA Speedy. Today we'll talk about why Cyberpunk 2077 is an absolute nightmare. Let's head into it. Cyberpunk 2077. One of 2020's biggest games is the often delayed Cyberpunk 2077, but there's big hype coming with a big launch. In the few weeks since its release, Project Red developer CD has come under fire and publicly apologized, in addition to the usual hilarious and not so hilarious bugs that often ship with large open world games. For the technical performance of the game on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, refunds on the console have become so prevalent that Sony pulled the game out of the PlayStation Store. You may believe that Cyberpunk is an unmitigated disaster, judging from these headlines and more, that New York Times has even wrote about its problems. The game is far from perfect, but this open-world RPG shooter also has plenty to love. Night City's world is staggeringly big. The first act is limited to a single region of the city, and even that area is filled with side jobs, gigs, and hustles, all of which are increasingly dotted on the map as you earn street cred, your reputation's secondary XP bar. A bunch of gangsters sitting around doing gangster stuff are involved in hustles, drawing you to take them out and collect a quick, simple reward. Gigs are given out in that region by a fixer, the head criminal organizer, and involve a few additional steps and scenarios, such as sneaking into a well-guarded dockyard to plant a tracker on an imported car or infiltrating a nightclub to assassinate a crime ringleader. The Ubisoft method of throwing a bunch of icons on the map is used by Cyberpunk, along with frequent quick travel points, making it much easier to navigate the sprawling metropolis. But the sheer amount of content in every city blocks that in 20 hours I've only explored 2 of the 6 city regions, and when it comes to exploring every available task, I'm far from a completionist. These were all pretty good parts of the match, the rest is an utter nightmare. Why it's a nightmare? The reason why modern or futuristic cities do not do most open world games is that it is simple to simulate all people and traffic. Everything about the simulation attempt of Cyberpunk is purely illusory and immersion breaking, from disappearing cars in traffic to teleporting cops who, when you break the law, appear right behind you. How in the city can crime even exist? For a modern action game, the NPC AI is disappointingly rudimentary, and all the brief cuts taken to craft an open world are glaringly apparent. Cyberpunk 2077 from 2 generations ago barely measures up to the Grand Theft Auto games. If the world were at least fun to drive around in, some of that could be forgiven. In Night City, you're not going to find any pilotable flying cars, and while motorcycles exist, you're never going to see one being driven. Despite the story consistently offering exotic cars for purchase, the driving feels basic and tacked on. There are no stats, no mods, or customization when it comes to vehicles, and there is no unique vehicle-based content such as ramps or races, and no way to keep stolen cars for yourself. Night City's tone also reeks of trying hard teens. The designers felt that sex and violence are an integral part of the genre, particularly sex, and you are bludgeoned over the head with explicit billboards and advertisements at each corner. And yes, there's a sex shop where you can buy a giant dildo battle axe with a giant floppy dildo, a gag ripped straight from Grand Theft Auto, a series purposely dripping with Americans' cultured parody and satire. There is more to Cyberpunk genre than just edgy sex jokes. Cyberpunk 2077 is leaning too hard towards punk and not enough cyberpunk, which is ironically slang for internet sex. Cyber refers to navigating a 3D cyberspace. What the fuck? You can't define a word with the word that's being defined. Cyber refers to navigating 3D cyberspace with fun visuals in the situation, a la Tron. Instead, a painfully simple minigame of code breaking for loot, replacing a lockpicking minigame in fantasy RPGs, is presented by jacking into terminals, while hacking is done entirely by pressing a button first person, essentially acting as your spellcasting system. It's not awful, and they become very impressive if you devote yourself to these skills, but it still lacks that feeling of cyberspace. The bugs. The reason why the last few weeks have been lambasted by Cyberpunk 2077 and developer CK Project Red, that's not correct, and developer CD Project Red is due to the egregious number of bugs and glitches, rendering the last-gen console versions almost unplayable and leading to joke videos like this one. GameSpot has put together a hilarious compilation of glitches, mostly culled from Reddit, on YouTube for a montage of bugs, including T-posing NPCs and flying cars, not the good kind. Intrepid players have even discovered unfinished corners of the world, further exposing a game that, despite the delays, has been rushed to release. Most of my personal PC experience was blissfully bug-free, but I got stuck in hack view, prompting a reload and saw the occasional NPC T-posing. For funny visual glitches and other oddities, big open world games are notorious, and it's disappointing that Cyberpunk 2077 not only continues the trend, but appears to set a new low standard. The good news is that from here it ought to get better. Usually developers are quick to release hotfixes and patches, and Cyberpunk 2077 is already on 1.06 to date. However, that does not excuse the bad state of the game on release, especially the performance on PS4. With the exemplary post-launch support for The Witcher 3, CD Projekt Red gained a lot of goodwill, although much of that was compromised with the release of Cyberpunk 2077. I'm still having a blast completing missions and delving into the story. but it's definitely disappointing with its many open world limitations. A further cautionary story about overhyping and pre-ordering may be Cyberpunk 2077. What do you think about Cyberpunk 2077? Do you also agree that it's a nightmare? Let us know in the comment section down below. This brings us to the end of our video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hit like if you did, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our videos in the future. Also, watch the 2 videos that are on your screen because I'm sure you'll love them. With that, I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.